Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on waste reduction in veterinary practice. My name is Dr. Ian Sandler, and I'm the chair of the CVMA's National Issues Committee. Today, we will be focusing on the importance of reducing waste in veterinary medicine and its impact on business. We will explore different reduction options and the different streams that are unique to the veterinary industry with respect to remaining waste, as well as more generalized waste that we do accumulate in our clinics and hospitals. We will introduce innovative solutions that are available in the marketplace and how to ensure proper waste management in each of your clinics to really minimize the impact on the environment. The CVMA has begun to work in the sustainability space. We have an active working group and are building relationships in this area with other VMAs, including the AVMA, Australia, and Britain, just to name a few. We've hosted a webinar in January with the Canadian Coalition for Green Healthcare and continue to work with medical communities and including the Veterinary Sustainability Alliance. We're very excited to introduce our two speakers today, but just before I do so, this webinar will be recorded and available on the CVMA website for viewing in English. If you have any questions for the speakers, please don't hesitate to use the chat space, and we will make sure that those questions are available for them in the last 10 or 15 minutes. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Carrie, who's a procurement manager with Vet Strategy with over 20 years of experience in the procurement space and last 3 years focused in veterinary industry specifically. A recent graduate of the University of St. Michael's College at the University of Toronto in social responsibility and sustainability. And she also wrote her capstone project on reducing carbon emissions in the veterinary industry. We also have Robert joining us today, who is the Director of National Accounts at Waste Connections of Canada. Robert has years of industry experience in different sectors of waste management, including document disposal. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to our speakers. Thanks everyone again for joining us.
Good morning, hello and welcome. Give me a moment while I quickly get a slideshow up here. Okay, I think this should be visible for everybody now. Everything looks good?
Looks good, Carrie.
Okay, great. I will get going then. Thank you very much for your introduction, Dr. Sandler. And today we are here to discuss all we can do to reduce waste in our veterinary practices. Speakers today, as we mentioned, are myself and Robert. I am going to start off, if it's okay with everyone, with a land acknowledgement. I do acknowledge we're all here from different parts of Turtle Island, and I will acknowledge the land that I currently reside on. In Richmond Hill, we are on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations and the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations of the Williams Treaty. I also recognize that I am on part of the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee and the Huron-Wendat. I, as a settler on this land, am committed to reconciliation and speaking about the uncomfortable truths of my settler ancestry. Today, we're here to talk about waste reduction, and throughout this discussion, I honor the stewards of the land who came before me. I want to reflect on the meaning behind the one dish, one spoon agreement, and I commit that I will only take what I need from the dish, leaving enough for the people who come after me. And I give thanks to those who came before me and did the same for me so that I may live on this land. I also commit to filling the dish by learning more about Indigenous communities and sharing those learnings with my children and the people in my life. Miigwech to the Indigenous artist, Jessie Buchanan, for sharing her gift, wisdom, and insight through her art on the piece that's shared on the slide. So, sustainability is everywhere these days, including the veterinary industry. Veterinary students and practicing veterinarians have expressed great interest in learning ways to reduce their own environmental footprint, particularly on how to promote environmental sustainability in offices, clinics, and hospitals. Recent studies show that stakeholders in your practice, staff, clinics, etc., are looking for engagements on climate change. From a staff perspective, the upcoming generations are doing their research on companies and only want to work for, sorry, my slides are advancing faster than I want them to. Oh, sorry, this is not, sorry, there we go. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I think I've got them auto advancing where they shouldn't be. Okay, back to the recent graduates only want to work for sustainable businesses. As for clients, the example I use here is not in waste, but one of cremation versus aquamation. Aquamation is still relatively new. However, there are clients out there willing to pay more for a sustainable end of life procedure. I expect that aquamation will continue to grow across our country, and I believe that clients are going to begin to look for clinics to talk about what actions they're taking. And this is an opportunity to engage with your clients and ask for feedback to bring them along the journey. So what's happening in the vet industry in Canada regarding the environment? The answer is very little. If you look at the industry in Europe, they're so much more concerned and resources are available, such as Investors in the Environment's Green Directory, where you can check and see how green your vet is. There's a great resource in the UK called Vet Sustain. I've included a handout with them in the assets that will be sent after the webinar. Many of the references are from the UK, but you wouldn't be surprised to find some are available here in Canada. Let's focus on waste. We can go back to the 1970s when the original 3 R's were introduced. There's a bit of debate on where they came from, but it arose from a combination of the economic boom of the 1950s that led to an increase in the amount of trash being produced. And humans began to notice the impact and wanted to reduce that impact. The good news is that the 3 R's are still, and possibly even more relevant in our society of consumption today. The 3 R's have now grown to 5 R's. And what I really want to call out are the first 3: refuse, reduce, and reuse. Think about ways that you can do these things as you move through your day. We often forget the power we have or the circle of influence as an individual in clinic to make change. You have reps visiting your clinics constantly. Think about what they're selling. Do you need it? Maybe it's a product you want or need, but it comes with too much packaging. Challenge them. Refuse it if you can. That feedback will go back to the company, and with enough feedback, the change will happen. I like that this chart is an upside down triangle, and you can almost visualize the waste reducing as you take action in each of these areas. You're left with a much smaller amount of waste to be recycled. And keep in mind, there are a few different takes on what the 5 R's truly are. You might find different ones out there, but ultimately they do tell the same story. So we're going to talk about the first R in reduce. And this is the most effective way to reduce waste in a veterinary practice or anywhere for that matter. By definition, this means bringing less into the clinic that you will have to dispose of later. Lots of people assume that being green costs more, but this is the place where there's a real opportunity to not just cut your waste, but cut your expenses. Reducing is primarily the responsibility of the person making the purchase decisions in clinic. However, everyone in the clinic can reduce. Think of printing less and using reusable water bottles and lunch containers. I want to call out this image. This is from a 2022 New York Times article discussing the deluge, and that's their word, of medical waste swamping the globe. Now, this article ties back to the waste that was created during the coronavirus pandemic, but I think we can all agree that medical waste is a contributing factor, and any small impact we can have is helpful. When it comes to procuring goods for your business, I found a 17-question list that's a great tool to get people thinking a little differently. It's in a handout again that will be available. I grabbed just 3 questions, and you don't need to go through 17 questions for everything you purchase. It's just an exercise to stimulate thought and also to make sure that you're thinking about all parts of your clinic. The one example I like to take everyone through is coffee. Now, I don't want to bash any specific brands or make coffee drinkers feel bad about single-use pods, but There are many more ways today to recycle them, and some of them don't even require you to clean them out first. However, isn't it better just to never create the waste in the first place? I use a personal example of my husband, who's a massive coffee drinker. He sourced a reusable pod that fits in a machine for use at a family cottage. Now, it took some trial and error to get the amount of coffee correct, but now he uses that instead of a disposable pod. And this may not be suitable. If you have a client-faced coffee bar and it may be too much work for the break room, it is up to each clinic to decide what suits their individual needs for their staff and their clients. Next, we will talk about the continuing to reuse. All purchase decisions also have to consider what we can buy that is reusable. For example, scrubs in surgery. There are many options to purchase reusable items that can be perhaps autoclaved or laundered and reused. The initial purchase of these items is often much more expensive than their disposable counterparts. But over time, with multiple uses, the cost will almost always be better than the disposable alternative. And the image above shows that the difference between a reusable gown and 60 disposable ones. Continuing in reuse, there's medical equipment and supplies that may have options to reuse, and traditionally they've been disposed of. Some examples are listed here from veterinarians I've spoken with: surgical linens, sharps containers, heating blankets. But you know your practices better than anyone else, but I do encourage you to think out of the box and think about whether any items have second use even outside the clinic. Challenge yourself and crowdsource for ideas. Obviously, not everything can be reused in a medical environment. The chart above shows the Spalding classification system, and it can be used to give a second thought on what can be safely reused in clinics. Most of this will be common knowledge in your industry, but you know what can be safely reused. The example provided to me is a syringe for a vaccine, and this may be safely cleaned out and obviously the sharp disposed of properly, but it could be cleaned out and used for another purpose in the clinics. Other items might need sterilization, and that can't be achieved with an autoclave, which most clinics have, and may need gas sterilization. I encourage you to share these resources where possible, and if there's another local clinic with a gas sterilizer, perhaps they would be kind enough to share so that all clinics in the area can reuse more items. Now, obviously, no. Right. Once reduction and reuse is complete, there will always be waste at the end of the day that needs disposing. And hospital settings have many of the same types of waste as a household, but also feature many more types that require special handling. The comparison in this slide show, although not the exact same surgeries, show the difference that can be made when there's a focus on choosing reusable items where possible and just how much is generated. The first step in disposal is segregating the waste produced. Much of the waste produced in a clinic is medical in nature, and there are very specific rules and regulations regarding that waste. That doesn't mean it can be disposed of in a greener manner, but we'll talk more about that as we break down these categories of waste. There are three main categories of medical waste, and they include sharps, pharmaceuticals, and biohazards. We'll talk about sharps first from a processing standpoint. The best in class method of processing sharps is to use reusable containers. Since they're washed, disinfected, and returned to the clinics, a lot of providers dispose of the containers at the same time as their contents, but reusing is best if possible. Sharps waste, once taken back, is either autoclaved and sent to a landfill, or it's incinerated, creating greenhouse gases. Neither option is particularly great, but some providers are starting to process this waste a little more efficiently. For example, Stericycle now has a few sites with a waste-to-energy process that uses the combustion of the incineration to power a turbine that generates electricity, and it can be used to cover a roughly 50% or more of their plant's electricity needs. Next, pharmaceutical waste processing. Now, this is governed by many agencies, both federal and provincial. What's important about this type of waste is reducing the chance of these chemicals contaminating the water table. Back to reducing, the best way to reduce is good inventory management of pharmaceuticals, making sure the clinics reduce instances of expired medications and the need to dispose of them. But when it is necessary to dispose of this pharmaceutical waste, many clinics already have processes. My personal favorite is mixing the substances with kitty litter and water and placing it in a sharps container, which, as I understand, is an approved way of disposal. But there are other options for pharmaceutical waste with other providers, and most likely the providers you're currently using for other types of waste. Finally, we get to the biohazard processing. Now, biohazards are primarily incinerated. You'll find at times many cremation providers will offer this as an add-on service. However, cremation providers are not usually quite as advanced as medical waste disposal companies. And as previously mentioned, some providers are using this incineration to derive energy. Now, the last thing I want to go over is innovation, and I want to take a minute to talk about this. And I'm mentioning a couple of companies here, but please know that this is not as much of an endorsement as it is a reminder to look a little deeper, and you'll find that there's continually exciting innovations happening regarding sustainability in all industries. A recent example I found is a waste processor in Ontario, a company called Synergy. And they're processing all types of waste, including medical waste, through a process of mechanical friction that heats the waste while grinding the material and leaving an inert byproduct. This process has no emissions, only those generated through the operation of the electricity of the device. And it reduced the waste volume by 80% with no off-gassing or leaching. It seems revolutionary, but it's still early in development, and I can't honestly speak to the costing of this option. But the main reason I add it here is to remind you of those innovations. And even if this is currently expensive, as it begins to be more widely accepted, economies of scale will begin to apply and eventually make it a little more affordable. The next innovative leader I want to talk about is TerraCycle. And if you're not aware of TerraCycle, take note, even if it's just for your personal life. Many household products now have take-back programs for their packaging that divert waste, and it's actually paid for by the brands as part of their sustainability initiatives. You can find this in clinic. You may be able to use the Nespresso Pod take-back program, or Febreze uses and has an air freshener take-back program, and I know a lot of clinics out there are using Febreze. Even Royal Canin has signed up for pet food and has clients can return their pet food bags. And if you contact TerraCycle, you can get potentially a pet food Royal Canin bag installed in your clinic and encourage your clients to be more sustainable with their food bags. It's completely free to the consumer. As mentioned, it's paid for by the brand. Now, TerraCycle also offers some paid services, such as these zero waste boxes. You may have seen them around in many places, particularly during the pandemic for PPE. This is a box, and it would be an added expense to clinics. So it's up to clinics to decide if it's something they want to invest in. Finally, we get to recycling. At this point, your clinic has done everything they can do in order to reduce waste, and there's always going to be something that needs to go out. Obviously, the preferred method is recycling, but you may also have food waste or general refuge. I'm going to take this time to hand it over to Robert from Waste Connections to discuss this more in detail. However, there are many benefits to diverting as much waste as possible from recycling and reducing emissions from incineration. In order to successfully recycle, it's important to get your team involved and make it as simple as possible. Thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to Robert. Robert, please let me know, and I will advance your slides for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Carrie, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So I was asked to come on here to speak from a vendor partner perspective. Obviously, a lot of your clinics are producing predominantly waste, recycling material, and compost. I think Carrie did a great job touching on, medical waste and shredding. So I thought it's important to discuss the downstream effect of what you're producing at the clinic. I'll throw it out there as a question. Not everybody has to answer, but how many of your clinics actually lean on your vendor partners? Meaning, do you reach out to your waste hauler, which may be us or maybe somebody else? Do you reach out to your medical waste or biohazardous waste pickup providers or your shredding? They can come in and do site audits to make sure you're compliant and that you're obviously diverting as much material from landfill as possible. So I'll throw that out there for you to take that back to your clinics, because feel free to reach out to them to make sure that they come in and actually walk through and help and support you to achieve your goals. So what I wanted to do is just touch on, where the material goes from the pickups at your locations. This is a pretty generic diagram, but it kind of states that from the site level, it either goes to either landfill from a non-hazardous waste disposal. From there, landfills, and I think Carrie touched on it, there's some incineration. A lot of our landfills personally have biogas capture mechanisms in place now. So the negative connotation that landfills have actually is supporting the environment, because we are all produce waste and it's not going anywhere. When it comes to your recycling, and I'll touch a little bit more on in the next couple slides, it is critical for the clinics to think about how contamination affects the downstream recycling. What you may not know is, you'll have blue bins throughout your clinics. You throw the recyclable material into those clinics, and then from there you think, okay, it's going to be recycled. Well, if there's any form of contamination, chances are that load or even the loads of the trucks could be diverted to landfill. So it has a huge impact, and your clinics and your staff might not even be aware that this is happening. For organic material, there's really two places the organics go. It's either to composting or digesters. From there, it makes different slurries that actually produces biogas or goes to feed farms and cattle. So again, just a very generic slide that shows from pickup or cradle to grave, so to speak, where your material goes. Next slide, Carrie. So when you're looking at recyclables, most of your recycling is taken to material recovery facilities. Basically, they're big plants that do their best to sort the material, whether it's from your home and your Blue Box program or from a commercial service perspective. So when we pick up the material, and automation is having a big part of this, prior to the automation and AI, you'd literally have a line of people pulling the material out. We touched on, I think, sharps. I'll touch on this as well, that predominantly what we see at clinics from a contamination standpoint in our material streams is sharps, which has a big impact on our frontline workers, and biohazard waste ending up into the non-hazardous waste. So when they come to our material recovery facilities and we're sorting this material, again, those loads could potentially end up going to landfill, which negates the whole point of the recycling program. So you can kind of see the slide from aluminum, plastics, and it really stems to the point that the focus should be at the clinic level is to reduce or not purchase at all if you don't need it. Next slide, Carrie. And this is the compost stream. So like I mentioned 2 slides ago, any compost or material waste, and what we've seen in clinics is not a lot of clinics will have organics programs unless you're with your municipality that'll pick up your material. So it's something to really look at, and there's new technologies out there that can support taking organic material out of your waste streams. But for an organics pickup, basically the material goes to either digesters. It creates, like I said, biogas, which will fuel school buses, city trucks, our trucks. There's a lot of our trucks that are compressed natural gas, or it'll go to fertilizers and or feed cattle. Next slide. So like I mentioned, and I thought I'd take this opportunity to kind of point out the predominant contamination that as a vendor partner, we see at a lot of our clinics. Number one is definitely syringes and sharps. We find far too much that these materials end up in a non-hazardous waste stream, whether it's recycling or it could be just the general waste stream. The process of what happens is, regardless of what stream that goes in, we obviously will communicate that back to the clinic. And this could be either just a staff member unconsciously throwing the material into a recycling bin or not disposing it in a sharps container, or it could be cleaners. So it's very critical that there's certain SOPs that are created at your clinics to ensure that material that are going into the individual waste streams are the proper receptacles, whether it's a sharps container, biohazard container, or a waste or recycling container. So number one for sure is sharps and syringes, but we do actually see a lot of biohazardous yellow bag material in our front end or front load containers, and I'm sure that's consistent with probably other haulers across the country. And again, that negates any recycling or sustainability goals your clinics have when this material ends up into these streams, because we will not treat it as recycling. It will go to landfill, or even worse, we'll ask the clinics to remove the material. Next slide. So we talked about contamination levels. Oh, you want to go back one? Is it jumping ahead, Carrie?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to go backwards, and there we go. I got it because the video didn't play.
Oh.
Get the video to play. It played when I practiced.
If not, I can wing it.
Okay, yeah, I can't seem to get the video to go.
So I'm sure if this slide is accessible, you'll see the kind of images from national articles that have been released over the last 5 to 10 years. It's still true today. What's happened, I guess, 5 to 10 years ago is Asia basically closed their door to North America's recycling, or what we thought was recycling. Basically single stream or mixed recycling. There was a big fad. You throw it all in one container and don't worry, it'll be recycled. What actually happened, it was put on container ships, shipped over to Asia, where hopefully somebody would sort it. Chances are it just piled up. So China and other countries have started to block, and this is about 5 to 6 years ago, and it's relevant because it has an impact on companies within North America and us as a hauler, to say we don't want your recycling because really it's just garbage. And this is where the reducing has a bigger impact on clinics and haulers like ourselves today. Next slide will show you kind of how much material. Again, older dates, there's not a lot of stats to date, but it goes to show you a lot of our material was going overseas to recycle. And again, it put the onus on recycling plants within Canada and the United States to say, you got to manage your own material. And it becomes more important than ever that you source separate, and I'll kind of touch on that, I jumped ahead, but your material to ensure that downstream recycling, it actually gets to the end user, which is a pulp and paper mill and a secondary repurposer. So it's super critical from a clinic perspective that you understand what material you're recycling, having the right receptacles to ensure the material downstream can get recycled. So basically, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this really talks about multi-stream separation. If you don't or are not able to have this at your clinic, I would strongly recommend that you try to source separate as much material as possible. This will help your sustainability goals, ensure us as haulers or municipalities, depending on who you're with, or the recyclers are able to take that material and actually repurpose it. So cardboard is a commodity that everybody still wants. You can see Amazon and you get tons of boxes. So having a cardboard or paper only receptacle is super critical, and not mixing it with plastics and cans and aluminum. Next slide. what's this? The mixed recycling. Try to divert your cans and bottles, like water bottles, away from the mixed recycling or cardboard and cans and stuff like that. Sorry, I just repeated myself, but and it's important that you clean the containers out. I don't know how many are aware, but if there's peanut butter, I'll use a peanut butter jar comparison. If there's any peanut butter or any residue in these jars, they're not recyclable. They end up going to landfill. It can contaminate again the loads, and a recycler might not want it. Next slide. Perfect. So I kind of touched on the single stream effect. I know a lot of clinics probably have mixed recycling or single stream recycling. I would strongly promote to help your sustainability initiatives and ensure, again, downstream. And again, this is something you should probably take back to your vendor partners and ask them, what is happening to the material once it's picked up? What are my contamination levels like? It might not be shared with you, but there could be a lot of contamination pickups that they're tracking, and they just might not share it with you. But it is important that if you are going to recycle, try to do it from a multi-stream perspective. Just cans and bottles. Again, 1 through 6, if you're familiar with the plastic codes, any black plastic is typically garbage. There's really no end product for it, which is a number 7. Papers, clean cardboard, organics, and making sure that rubber bands are not on the any of the packaging if they're going into the organics, just bones and stuff like that. And try to move away from mixed recycling and try to focus on multi-stream. And this could mean multiple boxes, I guess, or blue boxes within your facilities. But it'll help your sustainability goals and ensure the material that's coming out of your clinics actually goes to where it should be, whether it's a recycler or a landfill or a compost or a digester. And I wanted to share this slide from a recycling standpoint. I know Carrie talked about the coffee pods. They are not recyclable. There's not a lot of recyclers that will take the material because it's too small. It will actually, bog up the MRFs with the conveyor lines. Coffee lids, there are some coffee lids. So it's important when you're going out there and you're going to your local coffee shop, take a look at the packaging they use, because there's some of the smaller coffee shops might have compostable coffee cups or lids. Just spend the extra couple of minutes to take a look at what you're bringing into your clinics, because it could impact on how you dispose of it. And again, these are some of the top common contaminants that we're seeing out of clinics. And it's important that it's going into the right stream. And this one got kind of messed up, but yeah, this is organics or compost. What we're seeing is a lot of rubber bands or cellophane or shrink wrap around foods and stuff like that. Just make sure it doesn't end up in your compost, because again, it'll contaminate it. And haulers like ourselves and other haulers won't take the time, because time is money, to pull that material out. They'll just end up putting it in landfill. Next slide. I think that might be it for me. Okay. Common contaminants, like I mentioned, rubber bands, zip ties, craft paper, what else? We have shrink wraps, lids, and other containers should be kept out. And there are some containers that are now compostable. Again, I would, ensure that you're looking at the packaging before you dispose of it. I think that's it for me.
Thanks, Robert.
Okay.
I'm going to just wrap it up here. We're coming to the close. So finally, the last thing I want to talk about is your clients. And is there an opportunity for sustainability to grow your client base? And I strongly believe if you can market your green initiatives and avoid greenwashing, that may attract clients looking for a way to reduce their own pet ownership impact. Speak to your clients. They're a great resource. So I advance the slide again. And many would love the engagement. Look for feedback on your initiatives and create a culture of accountability. I think with many clients, this will go a long way to a trusting and long-term relationship. And now I will ask if there's any questions for Robert or I. Can we answer
Well,
any?
thank you. There certainly are. One of the questions that we get a lot, excuse me, is secondary materials in veterinary medicine. So, for example, if our fluid bags come in a plastic container, or the syringes are in a plastic sterility container as well, how many of those types of products are recyclable? It's interesting because if you look at sutures, for example, my understanding is the plastic that the suture is packaged in is recyclable, but the sterility package is not. So again, maybe a couple of questions that are mixed in one here. One is how much of our, secondary materials from the hospital side can we recycle in regular blue bins? And then the other question too is, can you maybe comment on, even if there is a recycling number on the back of some of these products, do you need to check with your local jurisdiction to see if they take, number 4, etc.? So 2 questions, and I'll leave those to you to answer, and then we'll come back for some more.
I don't know. I think we can probably both chip in a bit on this one, Robert. The secondary materials, that's a very interesting question. I know specifically regarding the numbers and things like that. When you see those numbers, it's a safe indicator of where you can recycle them. But this is something the pharmaceutical companies and Johnson & Johnson, the big makers of sutures, and everybody, they're working on sustainable initiatives right now as well. And in fact, most of the pharmaceutical companies, believe it or not, are working together on these initiatives and sharing information. So they, I think if you ask your reps when they're selling, they should be able to provide you with additional information about their particular products and what is recyclable and what isn't recyclable. But it's something interesting. That's something that maybe we could go back and even create a library at some point of what can be recycled. That's a good thought. I'm going to leave Robert the question on the numbers, the recycling numbers, though.
Yeah, and to your point, Carrie, when you're dealing with reps that are coming in, they might not understand the market you might be in. For example, the West Coast is really good at a lot of their MRFs and technology, and they might have more markets open to them, whether it's the West Coast. So it's very critical to your point and to the question specifically is to lean on, again, your vendor partners to understand what's available in your specific market. I'll take Northern Ontario. What recycling up there might not be available to somebody within the GTA just because of the market for it. Recycling is commodity driven. And, if you go back 5 years to talk about the price of crude oil as an example, and I don't want to pick, actually, I won't say anybody's specific name, but like bottled water, for example, it was cheaper to dispose of plastic or bottles into landfill than actually repurpose it and buy new resin to create those water bottles because oil was so cheap. Now that oil has got a lot higher, the market is kind of spoken and there's more commodities for specific plastics. For example, the 1 to 6. I know there's some organizations trying to figure out how to break down number 7, which is like the back of your TV, as an example. And there might be some markets that can actually recycle that material. So to answer your question, yeah, it's important to talk to your local hauler and say, what type of recycling is available, show them the material, actually give them maybe a sample, and they can go to kind of local recyclers or bring it back to their MRF and say, is this recyclable? Can we handle this at our facility? And is there kind of a secondary home downstream for this material? Hopefully that answers your question.
And just one other point to that, a lot of the packaging, including pill vials and things like that, once they've had medications in them, they should not be going into the recycling bin. So, many clinics will have return policies, and you can look at doing that with your own clinic. Just to make sure it is going into your appropriate disposals. So that can be, incinerated or whatever. I think that would be very helpful. Another question for you both. Most clinics, especially in urban areas, will have staff going out for snacks and drinks and obviously lunch. One of the things that used to drive me crazy was that we created so much waste just by our imprint. So obviously having containers that we can reuse and things like that are always very helpful, and a lot of clinics and a lot of staff do that. But what about washing out containers prior to recycling? Can you comment on whether that's essential?
Short answer, yes, absolutely. To ensure a secondary recycler will take that material, the packaging should be clean as much as possible. I'll use, like I said, the peanut butter jar scenario. If there's a little bit of crap peanut butter still in the jar, it doesn't get recycled because it doesn't get broken down when it goes to a plastic recycler. If there's, I'll use the pizza box example. And again, it's market specific. If you get a pizza box that has a lot of grease and oil, a pulp and paper mill can't break that pizza box down. So in theory, that pizza box should go into landfill because it's not recyclable. So it's important that you clean out your packaging and your containers prior to recycling. The better option is to bring your own containers that you can package this material in. You can give it to your local store or wherever you're buying your food and say, can you put it in this packaging, and then take it home and washing it. And that'll cut down on the cost for the clinic because you're not paying for disposal.
Robert, I put my peanut butter containers through the dishwasher now. That's how crazy I am.
Correct.
We had a question from Colleen Pratt. I'm not sure if we can turn Colleen's video on and her voice on as well.
Hi there. Yeah, I was just going to make a comment that I find we have an app from our waste management. We're in the city, we're in Edmonton, and I find it so helpful because whenever we have a question, you just type something in. And even I just typed in now medication like pills, and it will tell me to go to my local pharmacy or veterinarian. So it will also, it knows my location. And if there's a reuse store, it will tell me the location of the next reuse store. And if I'm able to do that, it'll tell me to go to put it in my blue bag. If I put in coffee cup, it'll tell me to go to the garbage. But if I put in a plastic cup, and it shows pictures, and it will tell me where I should put it. And so I find, with those, the pizza box, whenever you have this question, you just go to your app on your phone, you type in the search, and then it will give you really good instructions. Because I know every city has different ways that they recycle or what they will take. You can't just kind of generalize. So just do other cities have that? Is that something unique to Edmonton?
No, I think most cities and municipalities that are kind of forward thinking, I guess, with their waste management process will have various apps or websites that you can go to. It sounds like Edmonton's is really good. I know the city of Toronto, an example, has a website you can go to. I can't speak to specific apps, but I would probably, pretty confidently say that most big cities will have something similar.
Mm-hmm. York Region does.
Yeah, there was a question also. Thank you, Colleen. That was a great comment. There was a question here around returning, half-used products to the distributor. Much of that has stopped, especially because of GMP transport requirements back and forth. And remember, every single time you send something back, that's also, carbon imprint, if you will. So most of us have Stericycle or products like that in the clinic to destroy, utilize older products. So, typically that's what the pharmacies will do. And again, most pharmacies will take product, even if it's dispensed from your clinic. So I know in most jurisdictions that's in place, but certainly veterinary clinics can do so. And that's an added service to your clientele as well. We had a question regarding sustainability certification, and Carrie and Robert, do any of you have any experience with any programs along those lines that could be helpful?
Sorry, what was the question again?
On sustainability certification programs that could be helpful for veterinarians or veterinary staff that are interested in understanding more about this.
I think that would be a great question.
Yeah, no, there's a lot out there right now, and I know even as I've recently gotten a degree in this, there's a lot of individual courses and certifications. It's not very regulated right now, so I think any accreditations aren't necessarily too great. There is the B Corp is probably one of the best ones out there, and I've searched for veterinarians on B Corp before, and you're not seeing much. It's just not an industry that the B Corp is really using it in. I mentioned earlier in the presentation too, in the UK, there's a great website, and it's not just for veterinarians. It's literally for all businesses, and you put the name of the business in, and it ranks them all. So that's something I don't know. I'd like to see someone set up in Canada so that you can see, and they have a whole category for veterinarians, and they rate the veterinarian on I think it's a scale of 1 to 5. But there's some interesting stuff out there. But I think at this point, most of what you want to do is just communicate with your clients what you're doing, and let them know that you are taking steps in that direction.
Robert, any comments from your end?
Yeah, I know specifically to what Gary mentioned, there's not a lot of courses per se specific to specific verticals, if you will, or industries. From my perspective, I see very generic training around sustainability, but because it's becoming very more prevalent, and more governing bodies are making it more compliance, you're going to see, I think, a lot more courses specifically to the veterinarian sector or hospital sector or any industry come up over the next few years. So,
and certainly, I'm sorry, go ahead, Terry.
That does remind me too, again, in the UK, there is some certifications. I think Vet Sustain offers a certification. IVC has developed their own certification. You can go through a certain process and get certified, but that really doesn't exist here, to my knowledge.
And that's a great call out to the Veterinary Sustainability Alliance for sure. And I know that CVMA is starting to work closely with organizations like the Veterinary Sustainability Alliance and other organizations to really help propel some of these initiatives forward and provide tools for veterinarians, and most importantly, the veterinary teams that support the clinics. So certainly you'll see more from the CVMA. We know that this is a very, very important area, and it's not just emergence anymore. It's really critical. So it's super important. Any closing comments from either Carrie or Robert?
Not for me, Carrie.
I would just say, feel free to reach out. I don't mind sharing my contact information with resources. I'm happy to discuss it. It's an area I'm very passionate about, so I can get deep into conversations and probably talk your ear off if given the opportunity. But I'm happy to hear from anyone.
Well, again, to both Carrie and Robert, thank you so much for sharing your insights. We look forward to keeping in touch with you both on these topics. And again, on behalf of the CVMA, thank you so much for participating, everyone, today. And again, this will be posted on the website for future viewing. Thank you very much, and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.